Well, good morning, Sunday School kids. Pastor Al here with our Bible story for today. I'm kind of excited about this one because, well, it tells a story about a leader of the Israelites named Joshua. He was the leader that came after Moses, and he was the one that helped bring all of the Israelites into what they called the Promised Land, which was the land of Israel, the land where they would live for the next couple thousand years. And it tells a story of a town named Jericho that was the first town that they encountered when they crossed the Jordan River. Now, I know we kind of look at these as just like stories, but I keep telling you, these are real stories about real people and real places. And I have been to Jericho 5 or 6 times in my life. I will tell you, it looks nothing at all now like it looked like 3,000 years ago. But it's actually one of the oldest towns on the face of the earth that's been built and destroyed and built and destroyed and built and destroyed. Actually, a lot of times. Not just the one you'll hear about in the story. I'll show you a little picture here. Last time I was there, people are digging down into the ground to uncover parts of the city that existed long ago. It's called archaeology. And we learn things from archaeology. And one of the things we learned in what happened here in this picture is, and I can't see it really well, so I can't describe it, but archaeologists tell us that this is a place where the walls of Jericho collapsed. And they collapsed in such a way that the rocks on top collapsed. They had bricks underneath them. And then you were able, if you were a soldier outside, to climb up those walls, rocks on the ground that had collapsed and get inside the city. Kind of fits in with the story today. Watch the story, and I think you'll learn something kind of cool. Because not only do we read the story in the Bible, but we can dig in the ground and find out that there are parts of the story that we can guarantee were absolutely true. So hope you enjoyed the Bible story today of Joshua and Jericho and God's people moving forward into the land that he promised. Have a good day, kids. Enjoy the story. Bye.
The warrior leader. After Moses died, God gave his people a new leader. His name was Joshua, which means the Lord saves. Joshua was going to lead God's people into the special land God had promised to give them. By this time, God's people had been wandering around in that baking desert for 40 years. So you can imagine how sick they were of sand and anything yellow and tense and walking and being hot. And how happy they were to reach the edge of the desert and to see their beautiful new home right there in front of them, all cool and green and lovely. There was only one problem: Jericho. Jericho was a city, but it wasn't just any old city. It was a fortress, and it stopped anyone from getting into the land. The people looked at Jericho, at the big, giant, scary walls around it, at the tall, towering ramparts, at the heavy iron gates bolted shut, at each other. What would they do? No one knew. But God knew, and God told Joshua what to do. But Joshua must have looked surprised because it was a very odd battle plan indeed, as we'll soon find out. Then God made his people a promise. I will always be with you, and I will never, ever leave you. If you do what I say, your lives in the new land will be happy, and everything will go well. So Joshua gathered his army together. They had their swords and spears and shields. They were ready to fight. But the plan wasn't about fighting. It was about trusting and doing what God said. Joshua's army went marching, marching, marching around the city, day after day after day. They're too scared to fight, the people in Jericho said. Oh, but they were wrong. God's people weren't scared. They were waiting for God to tell them what to do next. On the seventh day, God told his people to march around the city not once, but 7 times. Then God told everyone to make as much noise as they could. Has anyone ever told you to make as much noise as you possibly can? Well, imagine that noise. Add 39,999 other people making that noise too. And you get the idea. Ear-splitting. And, as it turned out, stone-splitting too, because the huge, strong walls of Jericho just crumbled to the ground, as if they were made of sand. Jericho vanished in a great cloud of dust. So it was that God's people entered their new home, and they didn't have to fight to get in. They only had to walk. Joshua said, "God has brought you safely here. Now will you do what he says?" Everyone said, "We promise." "Only God can make your heart happy," Joshua said. "So don't pray to pretend gods." "No," they said, "never." Well, I'm afraid they didn't keep their promise. They didn't do what God said, and many years later, just as God had warned them, things would go badly for God's people. They would lose their home, enemies would capture them and take them off as slaves, and God's people would scatter into many different lands. But God's plan was still working. One day, he would give his people another leader and another home. But this home, no one could ever take from them.